One state watched a 40-acre office building sit empty and rotting for 18 straight years, right in the middle of its biggest business district. Another state lost its only pharmacy in 38 small towns in a single year. A third state handed hundreds of millions in tax breaks to a company that left without paying a dime in severance to the workers who stayed until the very end. Today, we're counting down the 10 states Wall Street hit hardest. Not the stores, the states, the towns, the people still living with what happened. And the state at number 1, that's the one I keep coming back to. Number 10, Massachusetts. The retail apocalypse didn't start in 2015. It started in Massachusetts in 1988 with borrowed money. Ames department stores, founded right in Southbridge in 1958, the working-class store of New England, not glamorous, not pretending to be. Affordable clothes, household basics, a place where regular families could actually stretch their dollars. At its peak, Ames had 700 stores across 20 states. In 1988, the people running Ames decided to get bigger, fast. They bought a rival chain called Zayre, 400 stores, for $800 million they didn't have. So they borrowed it. All of it. Junk bonds, massive loans, the whole playbook. The idea was that size would make them stronger. It didn't. In the first year after that merger, Ames lost $228 million. Not because the stores weren't working, because the interest payments were eating everything. They filed for bankruptcy in 1990, limped out, filed again in 2002, and that was the end. When those final 327 stores went dark permanently, tens of thousands of workers were gone overnight. And across Massachusetts and the rest of New England, the plazas where Ames used to anchor just sat there, mostly empty. Some of them for over 20 years. I've seen pictures of the old Ames footprint in towns across the state, that peaked roofline, the faded ghost of the logo still baked into the brickwork, sitting there in the snow. Town after town, losing commercial tax revenue year after year because no replacement tenant ever showed up. The debt that killed Ames wasn't unavoidable. Someone made a choice to borrow $800 million. The towns of Massachusetts paid for that choice for 2 decades. Number 9, Tennessee. Fred's Pharmacy, Memphis-based. And for a lot of people in rural Tennessee, the only pharmacy they could actually get to. Not CVS country, not Walgreens country. Small towns where the pharmacist knew your name, your doctor, and your prescriptions by heart. In 2016, a hedge fund called Alden Global Capital bought a controlling stake in Fred's. And right away, things started moving in a direction that had nothing to do with filling prescriptions. To fund the purchase, they drained cash reserves from a newspaper company they also controlled. Once inside Fred's, 4 board members paid themselves close to $1 million in a single year, while the company was losing money. Then Alden's founder moved the corporate headquarters out of Memphis to a building in Dallas that he personally owned, so Fred's would have to pay him rent. The Memphis headquarters sold off for $8.25 million during the liquidation. Gone. 6,500 jobs, gone. And in small towns across Tennessee, people drove to their Fred's and found a piece of paper taped to a locked door. Go find another pharmacy. Except in a lot of those towns, there wasn't one. Elderly patients, people managing chronic conditions, people who couldn't easily drive an hour, left scrambling. Alden wasn't confused about what they were doing. They had done it before, with other companies. That's what makes it harder to explain away. The people running Fred's into the ground walked away fine. Their patients didn't. Number 8, Michigan. Kmart was born in Detroit. Sebastian Kresge opened his first store there in 1899, and for 100 years, the company was one of the biggest employers in the state. At its peak, nearly 2,500 locations worldwide. The blue light special was something every American kid knew. That little siren, that flashing light, the chaos in the sale aisle. In 2003, A hedge fund manager named Eddie Lampert took control of Kmart out of bankruptcy, and quickly it became clear he wasn't running a store. He was running a financial asset. He stopped spending money on the stores. Roofs leaked. Inventory went unmanaged. The basic things you have to do to run a retail operation, he stopped doing them because he was saving the cash to buy Sears. That was always the plan. He merged the two companies in 2005 and moved the corporate headquarters from Troy, Michigan to Illinois. And the old Kmart headquarters? Fort Kresge, 40 acres, 9 office towers, 5,500 employees, was just abandoned, left there on Big Beaver Road in Troy for 18 years. I've gone through the photos urban explorers took. Water damage on every floor, mold in the carpets, cubicles still set up from the day everyone walked out. The city of Troy lost nearly 2 decades of premium commercial property tax on that site. The restaurants and businesses nearby that had depended on 5,500 daily commuters, gone. They finally tore it down in 2024. 18 years of looking at that from the road. That's not a footnote. That's what hedge fund starvation looks like when it lands on a specific zip code. Number 7, Ohio. This one isn't about a single store. It's about what happens to an entire town when a mall becomes a financial product on Wall Street and the math stops working. Randall Park Mall opened in North Randall, Ohio in 1976. At the time, it was the largest shopping mall in the entire world. 2.2 million square feet, 5 anchor stores, 5,000 employees, in a town of 1,500 people. The mall employed more than 3 times the entire population of the town it sat in. During the 2000s, commercial real estate got bundled into complicated loan packages and sold to investors in New York. Malls needed to stay almost completely full just to cover the debt payments. That was fine, until private equity firms started bankrupting the department store anchors. When JCPenney pulled out, when other anchors went dark, a clause buried in every small store's lease kicked in, called a co-tenancy clause. It says, if the big anchor leaves, we can cut our rent or walk away entirely. So the food court places, the shoe stores, the smaller shops, they all stopped paying full rent. Legal right to do so. The mall's income dropped overnight. They couldn't make the loan payments. Foreclosure, no maintenance, no security. Then, nothing. I looked at photos of Randall Park Mall in its final years. Escalators buried in broken glass. Weeds growing up through the floor of the concourse. Empty 5-story atrium. The town's official seal, the seal you'd see on official town documents, actually featured 2 shopping bags on it because the mall was that central to North Randall's identity. That seal eventually became a symbol of something else entirely. The mall was demolished in 2015. What went up in its place was an Amazon fulfillment center. That's the full story, right there in one image. Number 6, California. California is the one where the state actually fought back and lost. Within 2 years of Mervyn's closing, the corporate headquarters on Foothill Boulevard in Hayward, 11 acres, the city's largest private employer, had become a squatter encampment. Up to 80 people living inside an abandoned office complex. Hundreds of police and fire department calls. The city spending money it didn't have to manage a building that a private equity firm in New York had simply walked away from. California's Attorney General eventually took the private equity firms to court. The settlement was $166 million. And the settlement money? It went to creditors. The 30,000 workers who lost their jobs saw essentially none of it. California has some of the strongest labor laws in the country. The AG's office went to court, won, and the people who actually stocked those shelves and ran those registers still walked away with nothing. That's not just a corporate failure. That's a failure of the state's own enforcement system to do what it was built to do. Number 5, Pennsylvania. York County school districts lost $4.2 million in property tax revenue in the 18 months after Bonton liquidated. That's not an abstract number. That's classroom aids, bus routes, building repairs, the things school boards cut when a major commercial taxpayer disappears overnight. The Pennsylvania State Pension Fund was a bondholder in Bonton. State employees, teachers, public workers, people who had spent careers in Pennsylvania classrooms and courthouses had their retirement money tied up in Bonton's debt. When the liquidators came in and sold everything down to the fixtures, bondholders got pennies on the dollar. Pennsylvania's own retirees helped finance the chain's final years without knowing it, and got almost nothing back when it collapsed. The state's workers were unknowingly funding the same company that was about to gut the tax base of their hometowns. And when it fell, they absorbed that loss too. York, Pennsylvania lost 2,000 headquarters jobs. 23,000 workers lost their jobs nationwide. And the pension fund that was supposed to protect the people who served the state, it was sitting in the rubble right alongside everybody else. Number 4, Texas. In 38 Texas towns with fewer than 5,000 people, Stage Stores wasn't the most convenient clothing option. It was the only clothing option within 60 miles. Not an exaggeration. I checked. 60 miles in rural Texas means an hour of driving each way on a good day, in a car you can afford to run, for gas you can afford to buy. When those stores closed in the summer of 2020, those towns didn't just lose retail. They lost sales tax revenue that funded volunteer fire departments and road maintenance and local emergency services. Texas has a program designed to support rural main streets. It quietly absorbed some of that cost, meaning state taxpayers covered losses that a Houston-based company and its Wall Street backers created and then walked away from. The distribution center in Jacksonville, Texas, 435,000 square feet, the logistical heart of the whole operation, went to auction, sold for $7 million. That number was barely covered at the time, but the sales tax those stores had generated for rural Texas communities over decades, that's gone. No auction, no settlement, no recovery. Just main streets in small towns that were already thin, now thinner. Number 3, New Jersey. The Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, A&P, founded in 1859. For most of the 20th century, the largest grocery chain in America. 156 years of feeding this country with its corporate headquarters in Montvale, New Jersey. It filed for bankruptcy in 2010, came out of bankruptcy, filed again in 2015. What bankruptcy lawyers call a Chapter 22, bankrupt twice in 5 years. Between those two filings, thousands of union grocery workers in New Jersey lost their jobs. People who had spent careers in those stores with union protections and pension contributions and benefits, gone. Twice. The Montvale headquarters, a building that had housed one of the great American commercial empires for generations, was eventually demolished. Townhomes went up in its place. 156 years, replaced by a housing development. The Wayne, New Jersey headquarters of Toys R Us died the same way. Same era, same private equity mechanics, 33,000 jobs. No severance. A&P is the one that stays with me. A century and a half of feeding America. Union jobs built over generations. A New Jersey institution. Twice bankrupt, then bulldozed. The workers who made it through the first bankruptcy thinking they'd survived, then going through it again 5 years later. That's not bad luck. That's what happens when debt gets stacked on a company that never had a chance to carry it. Number 2, Illinois. Start with Chicago, Dominick's Finer Foods, a grocery institution in that city since 1918. By the time it collapsed, it had been absorbed into a massive supermarket empire carrying $12.5 billion in private equity debt. The chain was starved of resources to service that debt for years before the end came. Dominick's closed in late 2013. Thousands of union grocery jobs gone within weeks. South Shore, Bronzeville, working-class neighborhoods that had relied on those stores for decades, suddenly without a nearby supermarket. Food deserts created in a matter of months by a debt structure built in New York. Then there's Sears, and what Illinois actually got in return for trying to keep it. The state of Illinois handed Sears approximately $400 million in tax breaks over the years to keep its headquarters in Hoffman Estates. Keep the jobs, keep the tax base, keep the economic activity. That was the deal. What Illinois got back was an empty 200-acre campus. Lampert's moves with Sears are their own story. What matters for Illinois is this: the state paid $400 million to keep Sears. The state got an empty campus. And every time a Chicagoan still calls it the Sears Tower, that's the receipt. Number 1, Wisconsin. Shopko was the only store in 38 Wisconsin towns that accepted Medicare and Medicaid for prescriptions. Not one of the options, the only option. When Sun Capital closed those pharmacies in 2019, those towns didn't lose a store. They lost their pharmacy. Diabetics started driving 90 minutes each way for insulin. People managing blood pressure, heart conditions, chronic pain, calling around to distant pharmacies, trying to transfer prescriptions. Some of them hitting walls because the rural chains wouldn't take their coverage or didn't have their medications in stock. Some people stopped going as often as they should have. That's what a pharmacy desert looks like when you're 70 years old on a fixed income in a Wisconsin winter. Sun Capital loaded Shopko with $1 billion in debt, sold the buildings out from under it, paid themselves a $50 million dividend while it was sinking, and broke their written promise to pay severance to the workers who stayed until the last day. 14,000 jobs, 360 stores, 38 communities that lost their only pharmacy. Sun Capital is headquartered in Boca Raton, Florida. They made hundreds of millions from Shopko. The people of rural Wisconsin are still living with what they left behind. The same shape every time. A company that was working, maybe not flashy, but employing people and serving communities, gets bought with borrowed money it never asked for. The real estate goes first, then the fees come out. And when it finally collapses, the firm has already been paid. The workers get a letter. The town gets a vacancy. They called it the retail apocalypse. They said it was Amazon, changing habits, the natural order of things. And some of that is real. But private equity firms were responsible for more than half of all retail bankruptcies through 2020, from firms that make up only 7% of the broader economy. That's not bad luck. That is a formula. And local communities, the school districts, the town budgets, the pension funds, the people who stayed until the lights went out, they paid for it and kept paying long after the headlines moved on. Have you seen this in your state? A store that was part of your community for decades and then wasn't? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and I genuinely want to know what you watched happen where you live. If this video gave you a clearer picture of how it actually worked, please subscribe. Just hit the button below and you'll be notified when the next one drops. This is EconoNova. Keep an eye on the price of milk.